Hi, I'm Louise Maule. I'm lead practitioner at North Tyneside Learning Trust in the northeast of England, and I lead a regional programme of CPD for STEM learning as a science learning partnership lead. I want to talk to you today about a phenomenon that a lot of people experience, an unhelpful mindset that can hold us back in our work, in our careers, and in our life. And we'll talk about how we can get rid of that unhelpful mindset. So I'm going to share my screen with you right now. Here we go. Okay, and I'd like you to think, what do these people on the screen have in common with each other? They have all, at one or more times in their career, felt like an imposter. Michelle Obama said, "It doesn't go away, that feeling that you shouldn't take me that seriously." And David Tennant says when he's on stage that he frequently thinks that he is going to forget his lines, and he's even taken written lines on stage with him before because he didn't think that he was able to do the performance. Now, these are amazingly successful and accomplished people. You would think that it was ridiculous that these people would feel like they were somehow an imposter in their role. But this is imposter syndrome, and what I want to talk to you about in this session. We'll look at what imposter syndrome is and things we can do to combat it. The thing is, imposter syndrome thrives on isolation. We don't talk about it much anyway, but especially in lockdown, we've all been isolated to some extent. And I'm worried that the feelings of imposter syndrome are going to be amplified by having been in lockdown. And it's so important that we talk about it. I also think imposter syndrome thrives on comparison. When a person compares themselves to others, but often not a realistic comparison either, it's the Facebook highlight reel. And I also think that because we're seeing less of each other in person, in real life, and it's more online snapshots, that this is also going to amplify feelings of imposter syndrome. So what is it? It's a specific pattern of behaviours, and it's seen in women and men, especially when moving into a new role or context. It isn't just nerves or a slight moment of overwhelm. It's a belief or an absolute certainty that you have somehow accidentally and wrongly ended up in the position you were in, and probably somebody's going to come and say, "Oh, I'm very sorry, there's been a mistake. You have to go now." And these feelings are there despite evidence to the contrary that you are in fact very qualified and capable of doing the role. It might surprise people who experience imposter syndrome that other people have these thoughts and feelings too. It is quite common. It was first coined in the 1970s, so it obviously isn't just you right now that is experiencing this. But generally, it isn't talked about and it is endured alone. I like that cartoon. This is an illustration of what happens in this horrible cycle of imposter syndrome. So a person who is already feeling this way is given an achievement-related task. Consumed by anxiety, self-doubt, and worry, they will do one of two things. They will either procrastinate or over-prepare. When the task is done to a high standard and successfully, the person will feel relief and get some positive feedback on their work. But the person that has procrastinated because of imposter syndrome will dismiss the positive feedback and will put their success down to luck. The person who is over-prepared will dismiss the positive feedback and be thinking, yes, it was only good though because I spent such a long time on this work. No matter how many accomplishments the person has, the imposter will not be convinced of their success. As we saw in the first slide, if even these people feel that they are somehow not supposed to be in that role or to have and enjoy that success, then that shows that there's no level of accomplishment or success that is going to get rid of those feelings. You might not experience imposter syndrome yourself, but as a leader, as a colleague, as a friend, it would be good to be aware that somebody that you're working with may well be experiencing imposter syndrome, and it can have really quite negative effects on an individual and a team. So have a think about the behaviours you might see in someone feeling like an imposter. So if there is a team member who is really overworking unnecessarily, or if they're not contributing because of a fear of imperfection, this could have a negative impact on them and on the team. It might be that they end up not stepping up to positions of responsibility, and they may end up underperforming because of this anxiety. Here are some other traits that you may see in somebody who feels like they're an imposter. You may have somebody who is a perfectionist and they micromanage and they don't delegate. Superwoman, Superman, they work harder and harder to measure up, but what are they trying to measure up to? Is it actually real? You have somebody who feels that they have to show up as a natural genius, and they may judge themselves really harshly if they don't get something right first time. Then there's the soloist who prefers to work alone because secretly they're worried that asking for help will reveal their inability and that they shouldn't be in this position. And then there's the person who shows up as the expert, measuring themselves on how much they know. And if they don't know, they'll spiral off into being really harsh on themselves. So what can we do to reduce these feelings? I'm going to give you 6 steps to work on to tackle this feeling, these ideas. The first thing is to talk about it. Being honest will really encourage other people to do so, and it'll probably help more people than you know. Think about the colleague who has just stepped up into a promoted post. Think about the new teacher. Think about the person who has new and increased commitments at home because of the circumstances. If you talk about it, it's probably going to help a lot more people than you realise. Okay, so we're going to acknowledge this for what it is. The first thing is to know that this inner critic, this fear, is the ego showing up. And the ego's just trying to keep you safe in your comfort zone, free from the risk of discomfort or failure or judgment. And it can make it seem easier just to not try, to keep doing what you were always doing. And how do you know that this inner critic is in fact the ego? Well, because the ego is very blunt. If you think about some of the statements that a person might be telling themselves about, you're not qualified for this, you don't have the experience, it should have been the other person that got this. No way would you speak to a friend or a colleague in this way. The ego is also very repetitive, and it doesn't look for evidence necessarily to back up what it's saying. So thank you, ego, for trying to keep me safe, but actually I'd like to move out of this comfort zone, because that is where the learning and the development and the excitement and the magic happens. I thought I'd put this quote in here because don't we all tell our pupils and our children to have this brave and resilient mindset too? So we've acknowledged the voice, the ego, the critic, whatever it's called, and we've done a bit of a reality check as well. Is what it is saying true? The next step is to collect evidence of all of your talents, abilities, and successes. And I want you to think about work that you've done and identify how you were successful or where you added value or a steer. I want you to be really, really specific here. This will take some of the emotion out of it, and it'll make it concrete in your mind. Imagine you were doing it for a friend. If you, on the other hand, are in a position where you are giving feedback, please bear this in mind, that it's very useful to be very specific about what was positive and what could have gone better, rather than a blanket, oh, that was a great job, because that does not help somebody who's experiencing imposter syndrome. Some really clear points would be more useful. Next, we are going to have a think about the language that we use and that can sabotage our own efforts, and it can then prove to ourselves that we are in fact an imposter in our role. The language that we use has a big impact on how we feel about our communication. When we use hedges, and women are known to use these type of words and phrases more frequently. So when we use hedges such as just and maybe, we are downplaying the importance of what we are saying, and it can sound apologetic, and it's downplaying the importance to you yourself and to your audience. And apologies as well. So obviously apologies are sometimes needed, but not before you make a contribution, a valid contribution in a meeting. It can unconsciously make you feel like you are taking up space or time, and you don't need to apologize for that, for those contributions. And then there are the disclaimers of, oh, now I'm no expert on this, or this is just an idea. When these are used too much in the wrong place, they can end up diminishing what the person is saying. So they have decreased in importance before you've even shared the point. You're almost preempting the point that it's not going to be important, and you come away kicking yourself. There's also the written communication, and this is one where we have a chance to check what we've written, what we've said. And I really like this grid from Danny Donovan on suggested alternatives to use. So keep that one handy. Now I'd like you to choose one of these at a time to work on, give it a go, and see how you feel, see if it changes anything. So now we've acknowledged that the feelings that we or a person have are in fact imposter syndrome. It's not based on reality, and in fact we have evidence to prove that we have had amazing successes, we've got brilliant skills, experience, and talents. We've checked in on our thoughts, we've become aware of any speech habits that undermine us. Next up is body language, and it's a similar idea. Researchers at Harvard University looked at body language and identified low power and high power poses. And by crossing legs, arms, you reduce the space that you're taking up. And the researchers found that individuals that did this did less well than those people who adopted a power pose. So try it and you might feel a lot better. Now we're ready for the next one. Next up is visibility. It can feel really, really hard to self-promote what you've been doing. Really uncomfortable. But it's not boasting. It is part of your job to update people on what is happening and what's working. Try and get into the habit of providing regular factual updates on progress being made, value being added, the impact of your actions, etc. And as well as increasing your visibility to others, it will do wonders in banishing that imposter syndrome mindset once it becomes a habit. Finally, I'm leaving you with a challenge or two. What one little thing could you do, a small nudge that expands your comfort zone and proves to yourself that it is okay and that you can do this and do it well, whatever it is that you want to do? Next, what one thing could you do that is scary? Something a bit bigger. Make it a definite action, give it a short time scale, and just do it, like I have today. I hope this session has shone a light on imposter syndrome, given you some understanding of how it can affect you and your colleagues, and also some actions to help you be in a great mindset to thrive in your role and, when the time comes, to step up to the next challenge. Thanks. Bye.